This is old Wyatt again. Welcome to Legend Hunter. We're at the site of a Templar Sun Temple. These Templar Sun Temples were set up to basically as maps. These maps would lead either to the treasures or to the gold mines that they left behind. This particular Sun Temple, we didn't know if we were going to be able today to film or not. As you can see, the weather has kind of turned foul on us. The clouds are moving in, which is kind of detrimental to trying to explain sun signs and shadow images that they created in their map system. The map systems were set up around mainly the letters that they used, letters of the alphabet. These letters of the alphabet included the most important letter, which was the alpha, the letter A, the number 1. This particular site that we're at right now is basically set up around a giant letter A. These letter A's could either be made out of quartz, or they could be made with a crack in the rock, but the fat letters, the large letter, the large shadow letter A's were very important, and so were the large quartz letter A's, which were made out of white, which indicated a light sign further along that could contain a shadow sign, or it could be a standalone shadow sign by itself. But the shadow trails that lead off from these maps are numerous. A lot of them basically lead to nowhere, but one of the things that has to be done at these sites that I don't have the manpower or the time to do is they basically have to be cleaned. You have to get rid of all the excess grass in order to read the signs and symbols that you're trying to find. Otherwise, you're not going to have any luck. Weed hook was one of their symbols, and I can see why. They could bring goats in. The goats would eat everything in sight. Then they could read the maps. I mean, it's pretty amazing if you think about it. That you know, in order for me to read this map site, it'll have to be cleaned. I'll have to bring in a weed eater and a crew and clean this site so that the stuff that is visible can be visible. Only until the site is clean can you see that. And even the long distance mapping, even the mapping, the survey mapping, and the angle, and the sun angle and distance mapping, and the solstice angles that they needed in order to create what they create at this time of the year, was basically all calculated. They would use the altitude and the azimuth and the zenith, at the sun's zenith. The sun would be at its zenith at high noon. It's where it's at the highest point. So they would basically use these the azimuth, the altitude, and the zenith, and with an algebraic formula using cosine, they would calculate the angles needed. Now there's a much simpler way that I've kind of invented for doing this, and I can show you real quick what that way is. I basically acquired this. It's the same as a plumb bob that they would use. It's just a level. It's a corner level gauge. It works off of gravity principle. It's got a needle that tells you what angle. And then I taped a tube off an ink pen on the back of it. And this tube sticks out. And you can basically take this angle gauge, like so, read it this way so you can read it, and you can point it up towards the sun and just zero in the sun, put the dot of the sun in the middle of the circle, and then read the gauge, and it gives you your angle off of that level from whatever altitude you're at, because your altitude and your longitude and latitude is going to make a difference on this. Now you can take a Bruton compass, a real nice compass, take the Bruton, open it up, line it up north to south on its flat side and put the flat side up against the outside of this angle gauge, and you can get the azimuth of the sun's angle at that time, at whatever time of day you're at. This is how they did it, and they would have that precise angle and that precise azimuth of the sun down to the point where they could use this to their advantage when they were creating the sun signs and the shadow signs in the temples. Each one of these temples was dedicated to the sun god Janus and the sun god Ra, and I believe Horus. And each one of these temples could be set up right in the middle of a small wash. They could be on top of a mountain. They could be on the side of a mountain. They could be hidden in a grove of trees. But generally, these temples were set up along trails so that they could find water, and they could also map out where they store artifacts and store their equipment and whatever they needed to move on with their agenda of gold mining. So with this little contraption that I've come up with here, it's very easy for me to find an angle and to discover an azimuth of the sun at its zenith, and recreate that angle with a spotlight or mirrors, so that I can attract the light I need and put it through, or put it on a surface in order to create these shadows. Now, I believe a lot of this stuff was done at night. They would simply calculate and raise the light up in the air whatever angle they needed to stimulate the zenith of the sun on that particular day, and then the light given off by the lantern would create the sun sign that they could create at night. So they did a lot of their work at night. But anyway, behind me is the letter A. I'm going to walk over to it and point it out because it's really hard to see. It's a shadow A. It's just now starting to form. The center of it is just now becoming light. So I'll go over here and point it out. That letter A forms as a dark shadow. There's some other shadow signs behind it that point off to some other a series of signs and lead off on a particular inbound trail. It's marked out by an X. All your inbound trails are going to be marked with some kind of an X, and they're only going to be visible for the 15 minutes that the trail was set up to view. You got to be quick to catch these. And then you may have to go to that next marker or trail, and oh, there was an owl in the background there flying by. You may have to go to the next marker or trail and basically wait until the next day. These maps are step by step, and you have to basically be there at the right time to view the stuff that you're set to view, and then you go to the next day. These were day-long maps. They weren't anything that you could solve all in one day and be done with it. You had to take each step one day at a time. They had 18-day maps. They had 7-day maps. They had 13-day maps. They may even have longer than that maps. I don't know. But I just know that each site that you come to requires more than one visit in order to weed out the particulars of that particular map and discover where it's leading to and where your inbound trail of choice is, which is going to be your Royal Secret Walker's Trail. The Walker's Trail are marked with the sign of a carved foot. It could be a representation, an abstract. Most of these signs and symbols are abstracts. They're not something that you can readily read. They're not something that you can readily look at and see. from many different angles. So these abstracts have to be interpreted as abstracts. They're representations. They're not exact duplicates of individual things. So Ted DeGrazia, one of my favorite artists, he lives here in Arizona, he was a master at doing these abstracts. And a lot of the images that he painted are some of the abstracts that I see as I'm out doing this thing and hunting for these symbols and signs of the Knights Templar and the Templars that were here, that conquered and basically prospected this land with De Re Metallica, which we've discussed earlier. De Re Metallica was a Roman mining system. They used the Roman god Janus in the system, and that's why we see so many references to the solar sun god and east-west directional god, multi-faced Janus, and that was the main god of choice. Now they also had many symbols of elephants, which represents Ganesha, which is an Indian or Hindu god, and it's also multi-directional, multi-faced, and it has what's called metamorphosis. It can shapeshift into anything that it wants to. So you might have animal heads on humans and human heads on animals, but the god Ganesha also is the representative of the Christ, or the Christian God, or Jesus Christ. And as you can see, the letter A is just now starting to, excuse my language, starting to form, and you're starting to see the shadow of the A come out, and then off in the distance you can probably see some other shadows starting to appear. We don't have strong sunlight, but might work to the advantage as far as what the eye can see out here behind me as we explore this Templar site that was created and dedicated to the sun god Janus and Ra and Horus. So what I'm going to do now is, we have a giant bust down here of the Roman god Janus, and it's only viewable from one angle. We can go down there real quick and do a little filming there. Since I'm on 1080 I on this camera, it ain't going to last very long. I do have 16 gigabytes of memory on here, but it's already fallen over on me once, and I busted my LCD screen last time, so that's kind of why we're doing this on the fly here. But anyway, I'm going to get out of the scene right now, and we're going to move on. Well, I'm back here. This is Wyatt. You're watching Legend Hunter, the treasure hunting show. Right behind me you see the head bust of the Roman god Janus. This bust was erected at this temple site to dedicate it to that god. This is also a watering site. It has drinking water that's suitable for animal or human. Who knows? Maybe this is the fountain of youth. I have found a symbol of the Holy Grail while at this site. But right now, all around us, there's symbols of feet and hands, which tell you that this site is basically carved and modified by the hand of man. So these priests that came in here and did this, these Templar knights, these Masonic Freemasons that came over and brought this type of mining with them, created this bust. And you might notice other things in the background that give it more symbology. Everything was viewed from a certain angle, sometimes at a certain time of the day. Most of the time it was just the angle and the distance that made the difference. But this particular bust has a mouth, has a nose, has an eye. He's wearing some kind of a headdress there. There's other faces built into this. There's a face on this. There's There's a face on that other rock up there. So there's multiple faces built into this, which are representative of the directions in the god Janus. These profile faces we've talked about before, are part of the mapping system. The blue stone that we're on and the many footprints and handprints in this stone give it indication of a blue lodge. Blue was a very important color. It represented the sky, it represented the sun, it represented everything good. It also represented water. That's why we have drinking water seeping out of the rocks here, and we have the god Janus taking a drink. The god is also looking up through the temple and getting you to the highest point of the temple that's safe to light the fire at the sacred ceremonial fire oil lamp pedestal that has a representation of the keystone at its back part, which is a wedge stone that was only used in an arch. This Janus head is a good indication of the Roman god with the long nose, the pronounced nose of a Roman god. And this gives credence to the theory that I'm putting forth about the god Janus and the Knights Templar Society of Janus that created these sites and buried their treasure and wealth throughout this region and throughout the world. These are the treasures of the Knights Templar. They're everywhere. They're all over the world. This system was used everywhere. I'm sharing this with you. I'm sharing key elements of the system with my audience so that possibly we can find something, we can locate something and bring this theory to light and see these artifacts for ourselves and maybe acquire some ancient knowledge that's been lost for a long, long time. That would be great. So we're going to move on with this. We are on 1080i now. We're getting high definition broadcast, and right below me is a foot carving, an abstract, and a hand carving, and I believe another foot carving. So they're literally everywhere.